Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Courtney Staples and CR Rowenson. On today's episode, we have our first jam of the year. We've got a full-on jam session, a Clark, Rob, and Courtney special, it seems to be. But before we get into that, remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow some instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter at Let's World Build, and you can go ahead and subscribe and do all that stuff over there. If you want to talk to us more directly, we're always over on our Discord with a link for that in the description. And if you're feeling particularly generous or just feel like saying thank you for the podcast, we have our Patreon with a link for that also in the description. And you get all sorts of goodies like the Aphid Lounge, our patron-only podcast, as well as Too Hot for Broadcast, of which there's probably going to be one for this episode. Who knows? But with all that out of the way, Clark, welcome back, my friend. Clark, good to have you. Where can people find you on the internet?
Always great to be here. The best places to find me are on YouTube as The Magic Engineer, all one word, or at crrowenson.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Clark. And let's dive right into the jam session. So, if you're new to this particular podcast, well, first of all, welcome. And if it's your first jam session, then the way that this works is that we roll randomly on some tables to figure out what the genre, theme, and focus is of the setting, and then we improv it live here with you. So without further ado, our genre that we're going to be working with today is... Ooh, baby. Our genre is going to be grimdark superheroes. So I imagine that's going to be like a lot of Rob Liefeld-inspired designs. Our theme for our grimdark superhero world is going to be rot and decay. And our focus is going to be a cataclysm. So our genre is grimdark superhero with a theme of rot and decay with a focus on a cataclysm. So Clark, as a semi-regular guest here, you're going to start us off because we miss your sweet, sweet voice. What have you got for your particular ideas here, Clark? What are we working with?
Well, first off, I want to assure the listeners that we don't rig the rolls. As much as it might seem like it, given just how perfectly this is tailored for us.
You specifically, I would say. Yeah, for sure.
So, grimdark superheroes, rotten decay, and a cataclysm. I'm almost instantly thinking of something along the lines of like 28 Days Later or even Annihilation, but with superheroes thrown in.
I just heard Courtney perk up.
So, like, there's this rot and decay that is taking over the world, and then we're fitting superheroes in. Either the quote superheroes are coming from the world of rot and decay, or being used to fight against the world of rot and decay, or both.
Okay, you've inspired me, Clark. I've got an idea. Hear me out. So, when I think of grimdark superheroes, one of the first things that comes to mind is The Boys, right? Show or comic. The show is surprisingly better in most ways.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, it's interesting. Garth Ennis is just so edgy, too edgy for his own good sometimes. Like I can't recommend. And anyway, don't want to get into it. But if we look at The Boys TV show, then the primary like origin for superheroes is a chemical compound, right? And that is how, corporate superheroes work. It's how a lot of heroes and it's how a lot of superpowered folk get their powers in the first place, is through compound V, right? So what happens if we have an entire world dependent on something that is a chemical formula that alters human DNA? Well, what happens if that chemical formula literally starts to decay and malfunction within the body? Well, you've got a bunch of superheroes that are rapidly deteriorating, and suddenly the world is hurled into chaos. I feel like that's kind of cataclysmic, and I feel like it's a really cool background for a setting to kind of deal with.
Yeah, I do like that concept that whatever's in them is starting to rot away. And like Clark, since you had brought up annihilation, I'm wondering if we can take that in a more like alien direction. Like maybe there was some sort of otherworldly contact that gave us this resource that we've started to use. But what we didn't realize is that over time, maybe it's the Earth itself, like the stuff isn't used to being in our atmosphere, that it's just not meant to stay here for as long as we've pushed it for. And it's starting to like turn in ways that we wouldn't have anticipated. And maybe it's something where scientists had thought like, oh, it'll, wear off eventually, but there shouldn't be any, adverse effects. But now it's like, oh no, there are adverse effects, like big time. Like actually something that I've seen recently is stuff about like fillers that people get, basically temporary lifts or lip filler to plump out their lips and so on. And like, it's always been discussed as like, it'll, wear off within a few years. It'll kind of fade away on its own, be absorbed into the body. But what's coming out more and more is like, it doesn't actually fade away. It like builds up in the body over time. And like, there's just a lot of stuff that hasn't been studied about it yet. So you can end up with some pretty rough effects if you just keep putting this stuff into yourself, because it never goes away fully.
Okay. Hear me out on this. Got some thoughts forming. So we can take sort of the annihilation approach of like something appears and it starts causing changes in the world, which starts being a real big problem, especially if it is, we don't have to go the full route of kaiju, but if it's starting to cause morphology problems and create different creatures and change the landscape, like maybe it was some kind of terraforming thing that was being sent. And we distilled part of it so that we could do the supercharging and superhuman adaptation of our own people to help fight against this stuff. The problem is we thought we took out some of the radical elements of it, but didn't do as good a job. And so now like the first and second, maybe third waves of heroes are starting to deteriorate, maybe go senile, maybe it's me. So body horror, if we want, maybe actually changing. But kind of what I'm thinking is like super villains didn't exist until the superheroes started to degrade. And they turned into villains, and now like they're shifting to be part of the force opposing humanity, and the power scales are rapidly shifting as nature is evolving and changing more rapidly, and the people that we had help fight against it are now switching sides because of the rot that's growing inside them.
Okay.
Like that, yeah.
I've got so many ideas about this so far.
Same.
Okay, so one, I want to simplify things in a somewhat goofy fashion, but because we're doing superheroes, I mean, like, come on, give me a little leeway here. So Roswell happens, and what happens is there actually are aliens that come to Earth, right? And in the experimentations, they're like, fuck it, let's try and bond human DNA with aliens. And that's where we get the early generations of superheroism, right? And there's generations of superheroes where like nothing happens. And then you're right, after a while, there is the grand betrayal, which is the alien compounds are starting to break down, and they are really bad with messing with human like brains, especially. And so the major betrayal is the birth of the first major supervillain. And it's kind of like how we didn't really know how CTE kind of affected the brain and how it made people incredibly violent. There's all this stuff about the brain that we just didn't recognize until it had happened over and over and over again. And it's like, maybe we should start looking at the brain, like maybe we should see what concussions do.
What is CTE for myself and other people that don't know?
Sure. So CTE is a condition that your brain effectively gets scrambled and mushed up from having so many concussions concurrently. And it is most commonly found in football players and professional wrestlers. Yeah. So Chris Benoit is a famous wrestler who committed murder-suicide with his family. Very, very tragic event. But it's one of those things that either gets covered up or is downplayed, or they kind of just don't really acknowledge what happens. Like they'll call it a tragedy, but won't actually investigate what happens. And similarly, there has been a lot of speculation that O.J. Simpson, who murdered his wife and her lover, was also CTE related. There was also another man, another pro footballer, who shot himself in the chest and told everyone, hey, you need to look at my brain because I know something's wrong. Like all of these tragic events, right? So similarly, I know that we're coming back to a grimdark superhero, but that's kind of what I'm thinking, is that the alien compound is doing this irreparable damage. And the first supervillain is a result of this kind of like, oh, it's the formula starting to turn and starting to curdle effectively, right? Because it's gotten too old. So that's kind of what I'm thinking at this part. And I feel like it works quite well with what we've got on the table.
And even if we push aside like the external element of like the world rotting and decaying and focus more on like superhero tropes, that works too. If we wanted to be like, this is the golden age of humanity, where we have these super soldiers that are helping deal with wars, oppressors, and local crime, and the world is getting better and we're entering a golden age. And then like our first wave of heroes are Captain America's, flip. Like that's pretty dark, and I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I do like that concept that we don't really see those external changes happening to the environment. It seems like everything's looking bright and there's hope for the future. And then all of a sudden, people who are supposed to be heroes start acting in really erratic and unpredictable ways. And it could even be like related to that, football player that you were talking about, who wanted his brain to be studied because he recognized that something was wrong. Like maybe that even was like first supervillains. They were trying to fight against the system that had put them in this position. And to the public, it was shown as like, oh, we've got these bad superheroes now. But in reality, like they were trying to get rid of the thing that had hurt them in the first place.
Let's imagine a supervillain who, like, let's say that you're playing in a role-playing game and you've been tracking down this mad scientist character, right, who's been allegedly kidnapping superheroes. Then you get to the lab and you recognize that a lot of it is just brain scanning and figuring out what's going on. And this person is not even evil. He's kidnapping the superheroes because he recognizes that something is off and wrong. And is trying to actually just do the research to figure out what is happening.
Right.
But, considering where we are, you're probably sitting in a group of younger heroes whose brains aren't half mush. And maybe you have a hothead on the team, or maybe they flip and become, the first Hellfire Club or the first Brotherhood of Mutants, like a la Magneto, right? Where they're like, nope, we've got to, start taking down the other supers. There's a bunch of different ways you could take it.
Yeah. Even just in terms of a campaign, just it's starting out with these villains that are going on, and all of a sudden these acts of terrorism and sabotage are like, I like both, where there being a scale of, as it continues, they get like more and more insane and more feral. But initially, like Captain America, the equivalent of Captain America, which we can't have Captain America trademark reasons, but you know what I'm talking about. The good guy starts resorting to terrorism and like blowing up facilities, and then later you find out he's trying to sabotage the production of the material because he's
there you go, that's good too.
Exactly.
Like, I want to stop this happening to more people, and nobody's listening. And by the time people deal with him, he's fully down the slide into full insanity.
It's like if they had spoken to him when he was on that downswing, when he started to do these terrorist acts to like get rid of these facilities and stuff, there might have been a way to like get through and like reason and stuff, but now he's like way off the deep end, and of course
too far gone.
That makes it easier for like the people in control, the corporations, the government, to like point to him as like, oh, he's the bad one, like we're doing everything right, we need to stop him and people like him, and they're bad, and actually we need to produce more superheroes to stop this threat, and then that gets into the whole like military industrial complex and like funding for that, and I think that can definitely get into the grimdark territory too.
We were way past the beginnings of grimdark. We're like,
I know.
We're deep into that territory.
Oh, I'm very aware. I just mean to even like more bring
because then you start going in directions of them being like, any of our registered heroes need to have chemical like kill switches installed, and
Yeah.
starting going like weird routes like that, and people taking advantage of it. It's like, yeah, we found a way that when we want, we can make you effectively brain dead and turn you into a drone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Okay. What about this as well? What about early on, right? Like there is a scapegoat supervillain where it's like, like let's say that there's like a brick house superhero who starts, seeing people who aren't there, or seeing, like, oh, I got confused and started like beating some helpless civilian. And it's like, oh no, you can just blame it on a mind control supervillain, or like there's a new supervillain out there who's making heroes like see things, right? Like it's baked into the setting where you can have that immediately. And oh man, that is even darker, right? Like what a great way that you can like exert control in that regard. Oh man.
Yeah. Well, because even if it's a golden age of humanity, there's still separate nations and separate groups. So like as some of this starts and the heroes are beginning to behave erratic and getting paranoid and leading to conspiracy theories, that could kick off a Cold War situation that doesn't actually exist, because they're adamant of like, somebody's messing with my brain. We think it's these people. They must have sleeper cells here. They've developed new technology. They're doing stuff that shouldn't be possible, and it's really just the heroes breaking down.
Let's also consider that many of these heroes are probably veterans as well, so you can mix in PTSD along with seeing things, and it's even like exacerbated to the nth degree. Oh man, that is we're in the grimdark territory. We're deep in there. Yeah.
That veterans idea is really interesting, because I could definitely see them almost being like test subjects. Like they're told like, oh, this is gonna, help you, give you renewed physical strength. If you were injured, it'll, get rid of these mental issues that you were having because of the things that you experienced. And initially, maybe it does help, and they feel stronger and they feel more with it. But then over time, it's like, wait a second, like this is coming back, but now even worse, because there's all this other shit in my body now that I can't control, that the government potentially is controlling.
Oh man. Yeah, like the mindless drone thing that Clark brought up is like, oh boy, that's really horrifying. Cause like imagine that you're like fighting a superhero, you look at their eyes and they're like very clearly like just not there. Right. Like completely glazed over. And then it's like, that's not a supervillain. That is the government who gave you powers who's doing that, that kind of thing.
Right. And like on the flip side, to be one of those quote unquote villains who's been switched into a drone, and then like imagining coming to, like, you started the fight, you were there, but then you black out, and then you come to and you just have like blood and gore all over yourself, and like a decimated corpse in front of you, and you're like, what the fuck just happened? What did I do?
Wake up screaming, and like you're suddenly a villain, and you're like, oh, how horrifying would that be? Like how absolutely horrifying would that be to wake up and it feels like you've been taken over or something like that? Like, oh man,
that's legit one of my greatest fears and worst nightmares. Like I've always been fascinated by werewolves, partially because that is my nightmare of like losing control, going on a rampage and killing all of these people that you care deeply about. Like the worst would be if you remember it and I don't know which would be worse, like doing it, remembering it, being unable to control it, or waking up and then having all of this evidence that it was you. You have no idea what happened. Like, that is my nightmare fuel.
And that brings in like a new level of warfare too, where like you're almost sending in people to serve as bombs in a way. Like you send them to a location, they're just a person, they look normal, they're able to get in no problem, infiltrate, and then you set them off and they spend the next hour ripping the place apart, ripping everybody apart. And
Manchurian Candidate style. Okay, I'm going to tell you this. If I were to run this as a game, I would tell you that it would not be a superhero game. It would actually be an investigatory horror game where you play regular people who have uncovered the conspiracy, and now you're being hunted by the world's greatest, somewhat demented superheroes. And how horrifying would that really fucking be? Like, dear God.
Or depending on how you wanted to do it, you could do it as a pseudo Delta Green type game.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you have read the series, but Brandon Sanderson has a series called The Reckoners.
Mm-mm.
And the pitch there is like people suddenly start getting superpowers, but only villains get superpowers.
Oh,
interesting.
And the Reckoners is an organization that does what they can to learn, lay traps for, and methodically kill the worst of the epics.
Huh.
Mhm.
So like you could do something similar to that where you need to be mundane people, and there's a research phase and all that kind of stuff, and then it gets tied into world politics. Like you could go a number of directions between like Delta Green, the Reckoners, Call of Cthulhu style,
Yeah.
even World of Darkness type stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Oh yeah, like what was the World of Darkness's Hunter, right? Isn't that
Yes.
what it was? Yeah. Oh man,
Mhm.
pulled that from like the early 2000s. Jesus. Okay, I'm really happy where we are right now with this
Mhm.
jam. I feel like unless you have anything else that we want to add, I feel like it's good. It's a good time to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
All right, cool. Again, that setting, big fan, love the concept, but let's see where we're going next because it might not be grimdark superheroes. In fact, it's probably not going to be. So, our next genre that we're working with is
Sweet romance.
maybe. Let's see what I rolled. 8. Well, actually, it's not too far off. Actually, it's urban fantasy. So yeah, think Harry Dresden, right?
Mhm.
Think the Iron Druid series, which I know is a weird pull, but I don't know why, it's where it comes from. The theme though
Iron Druid.
is going to be, oh, I rolled an 8 again. Ooh. The theme this time is war, and the focus is a rebellion or revolution. So, Courtney, with a focus like that, obviously I'm going to kick it over to you, considering that the majority of the characters I've played with you have been rebellious in some way. So, by all means.
And or war criminals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also that.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, why not both? Some say.
So for urban fantasy and war, that immediately makes me think of like gang warfare.
Oh, yeah.
In like the urban fantasy that I've read or listened to, it is usually like a more intimate setting in terms of it's focused on like an investigator or something like that, like Dresden or Anita Blake or along those lines. So I'm thinking like zooming in on a certain city that has, I don't know if it would be like a new gang forming there or a new presence in the city, or if it's long-standing tensions that come to a boil over time. What was the focus again?
A rebellion / revolution. So my brain immediately goes to there's a rebellion amongst the ranks of a pre-existing gang, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So that absolutely works.
No, I think the rebellion or coup in like a gang, or maybe it's even multiple gangs at once. They want to like overturn the old guard, bring in the new, and that just erupts into something much larger than they'd imagined.
Ooh, yeah.
Maybe because there's like supernatural forces at play that they didn't realize, or those forces are more powerful than they realized.
Honestly, I don't know why this popped into my head, but I'm thinking something along the lines of like either Gangs of New York or even Narcos mixed with supernatural gangs / race factions.
When you were saying like gang warfare, I was definitely thinking like roving gangs of fantastical creatures, like as in like Gangs of New York, but with I don't know, like a red cap gang or something like that. Or like vampires is the easy go-to, but we also just did the monster mash of vampires. So, but like that's immediately where my brain goes. But I also love Gangs of New York, but also werewolves and vampires and mummies are there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's a fun one.
Maybe we could pick from like lesser known monsters for this one.
I was going to say we roll for the monster mash and see what we get from that.
Yeah, do that.
All right, cool. Yeah. So let's see. Now, question: do we want to roll once and say like, hey, that is one of them, and then we kind of figure out from there? Or do we want to say these are the two sides in the gang warfare and roll on the table twice?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd say 2 or 3 personally.
Yeah, so it's a little more complicated, but what I like to do when I'm using creativity tools is I roll multiple times, so 2 or 3 without assumptions of what it's going to mean, and then see what pops up and blend it from there. So maybe the 3 will turn into a single faction that are united about a thing, or they're coming together to rebel against somebody else, or they might be 3 separate ones. Let's see what comes up.
Yeah, I'm with it. Yeah, so we're going to be rolling on the Monster Mash list. So the first monster on the docket is a new addition to the list. We've got the Onryo, which is a Japanese style ghost. Think The Ring or perhaps Grudge, right? One of those kind of murderous female ghosts. And also, I'm just thinking of like Onryo, but the pink ladies from Greece.
Literally just
yes, Courtney. Yes, we're sharing the same brain cell today, and I love it. Okay.
They've all got matching jackets.
Obviously,
it's canon now.
But all of their faces are obscured. Every single one of them. Okay, so the second roll on the list is going to be. Oh, this is one from our friend Ian. It's the Dragon Turtle. So we've got Onryo, Dragon Turtles, and I'm going to throw one more in there. The Banshee. That's coming from Courtney. So, okay, the Onryo and Banshee to me are probably the more interesting ones, just because I feel like there's more overlap, and I feel like that has more potential for, like a storyline there.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Dragon Turtles, actually.
Well, luckily we don't have to pick it, and we can just save it for an upcoming Monster Mash at some point.
Yeah.
So that could be one thing we do. We could have like the Dragon Turtle could be part of the setting if you want to go the whole route of like living on the back of the turtle or something like that. I could also see the Onryo and the Banshees banding together against some other form of either oppression or organization, because what leaps out to me is they're both types of angry ghosts of murdered women.
Yeah. I'm looking at the surprisingly brief wiki article for Dragon Turtles, and the last line of it is that Bowser is based on a dragon turtle. So I'm now thinking, like, is the dragon turtle like the crime boss of the city, and the Onryo and the Banshees are the people that he's murdered, perhaps? Maybe it's even like sex workers he had employed and then
that's good. Wait, that's Courtney. That's actually amazing.
That's great.
Because that's one hell of a rebellion, right? Yeah. Oh, that's great, Courtney. That is phenomenal. Yeah, you have like the dragon turtle, like kingpin of the city, and suddenly there's open rebellion amongst the crime empire, and it's all his own fault and doing. Yeah.
Oh, so at this point, we're almost looking at Kiss of the Dragon with Jet Li.
I haven't seen that one.
I don't know that one, Clark. Yeah.
He's on a mission, and he gets anyway. Point is, there's a bad guy who's dealing with a bunch of rings of prostitution and all that kind of bad stuff. But no, I like it. I really like it. That's cool.
Yeah, I agree.
And it could especially be interesting if you're dealing with something where for a long time there have been. So I think it could go one of two ways in my head. Is it could be a established city that there have been like wards and processes in place to deal with angry ghosts and either prevent them from forming or prevent them from being able to do things, or it's a new settlement where those haven't been established yet. But I'm liking the idea of like an older city where these defenses are corroding, and then suddenly that's allowed this rebellion to start forming.
Or it's like you have a lieutenant of the dragon turtle who's like a powerful necromancer or, spiritualist of some kind. And they've been holding back this wall of spirits for the longest time. And like, this is the calculated time where it's like time to shatter the spirit barrier and let all of these vengeful ghosts out. And guess what? They're all coming for you, and that's when the open rebellion happens. And obviously, because it's affecting the entire city. It's not just, one section. It's like it's everyone's problem now. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. With the lieutenant potentially being in charge of that, I'm also thinking that it's not necessarily like a purposeful coup on their part, but it's more like they've been, asking for reinforcements for more workers to hold this wall, to keep these wards going for a long time. But our Dragon Turtle Bowser crime boss figure has been like, nah, you guys got it under control this long. Like, you don't need that much stuff. Like, he doesn't want to commit the resources to that. And so over time, like, eventually the dam just breaks. And this happens.
I personally would be more interested in the faction of the ghosts being a bit more organized and less like broad scale destructive. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Gang and rebellion stuff in general is destructive to the environment, but I don't want them to just be like a rampant force of damage.
Oh yeah, agreed.
But what if this is actually a rebellion from the sex workers who have been methodically working to erode the wards, and so now they are allied directly with the ghosts and working together to be like, this is a corrupt system that like forces women into this line of work, and they are abused and destroyed, and we are sick of it.
No, I like that a lot. It's like, been like coerced into this or sex trafficked or what have you, and like over time they start noticing like their friends disappearing and realizing like, if we don't do something soon, I'm going to end up like them. I'm going to be killed after after I stop being of use or stop bringing in as much money. So we need to do something before it's too late for all of us.
Yeah. As a reminder, we also have Banshee in there, which means that usually, the folklore suggests that they're mourning the death of their child in some way. And imagine that you are a mother in search of a lost daughter. And then you find her, and then you just end up sleeping with the fishes, or I suppose the dragon turtle in this case. But how tragic is that? That like there are swaths of banshees that are just like looking for their lost children, and that is what happens to them. Also, I'm thinking that this is absolutely. I love where we're going, where it's like deliberate from the sex workers, and that there is like, over time, this group or individual has built up the trust of the lieutenant who holds back the spiritual barrier. And then on the night of the rebellion, it's like, all right, plan in place, like assassinate that person, break the barrier. Let's, let our friends and mothers be free, that kind of thing.
And I don't know if the coup, like it would be as successful as a single coup. Or even if they did kill the dragon turtle, there's still the organization to deal with, and all of the systemic stuff that has been put in place. And that can lead into a longer running conflict between all of there. And what you said about the mothers, because it's us and we can't help but make it terrible and gruesome.
And sad.
A lot of sex workers that get pregnant are forced to have abortions, or the kids, if they are born, the kids are just killed. Depending on where they are. So you could have banshees from people looking for children who were forced into sex work, or sex workers that died and ended up having a lot of their children killed in the process. And
man, this episode is definitely getting demonetized on YouTube. There is between this and the previous scenario, this is not going to work out, but that's fine. Like, I really love what's going on here. Also, I should point out, Clark, that similarly, right? Like, the systems are still set up, so it might not be as simple as all that, even if they do kill the dragon turtle. But let's say that the dragon turtle still wins out and is still victorious. Well, it means that his organization has been weakened in some way, in some cases substantially. So that might be the more interesting thing is, like his enemies sensing a power vacuum or sensing a moment of weakness, and that triggers an even larger scale war, So you could actually even play this as like a peacekeeper in a way where it's like, listen, if we don't solve this problem now, it's going to escalate because everyone's sharpening their knives and they're getting ready for war.
I just really, really like the idea of how this plan and this action and this rebellion that's happening is giving people who just systemically have so little power and control in and over their lives and everything around them, gives them so much more control over all of that. And I really, really like it.
Yeah.
Question. I'm thinking about this, right? Like, do you think that there is like a purposeful like self or like some of these women are allowing themselves to be possessed by these spirits? Like that is part of how the rebellion works is that listen, like they
Mhm.
need a conduit, like a physical conduit for the world. And then they're like, yeah,
Mhm.
fuck it, I have no control. Like I might as well, let my body be the conduit for the spiritual power and see if I can actually do something, right? Like play into that kind of idea.
Hmm.
Yeah, I do like that, and I like that it kind of ties into the idea of, like, an old magic, a sort of feminine magic, like all these women getting
Mhm.
together and
Yeah.
realizing that they need to band together and work as
Mhm.
one, and also call on those who came before them and, like, the power of those now dead women, and yeah, I do like that image too of, like, if they're in sort of a barrack setup as their sleeping quarters, if, you know, after a certain time when the guards finally go away, they have this opportunity to, like, sneak into the center of the room and put together
Mhm.
some sort of, like, ritual circle and do this thing as a group and, like,
Mhm.
gradually bring forth the presence of the ones who have died.
Hmm.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh boy. Yeah, there's so much. Oh man, there's so much that we can do. I love this. This is a really
Mhm.
great,
This is great.
interesting like setup. And like the city itself, you can really plop it in so many different types of settings, like
Mhm.
it's not specific. I mean, like I know that we're using specifically Celtic and also Asian inspired spirits, but like you can really blend them or mix them to your own mythology as needed. And
Yeah.
also, if I'm being real with you, if I keep the dragon turtle, it's going to be in name only, not actually a giant, like ship smashing, steam breath wielding like dragon turtle. Not going to be doing that.
And also not the Dennis Hopper re-envisioning of Bowser, probably.
Oh wait, no, that's what I would do. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, with the mushroom-headed Goombas and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Got it.
and with the putting the city into different settings too, I think it could work in a lot of different genres too, like,
Oh, absolutely.
we
Yeah.
haven't
Yeah.
really defined anything, but urban fantasy is typically, like, modern day-ish, and but it could
Mm.
also work in a medieval fantasy or,
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
um, sci-fi. This could be a space station, it could be
Yeah. I was
anything,
gonna say,
really.
Mm. Yeah.
this would be real cool on a space station. And I think another
Yeah.
thing that we haven't touched on, because a lot of times ghosts are like unthinking and single-minded. If we give them a bit more intelligence, which they would have
Mhm.
to be involved in some more of this, like you have this whole thing of them being fonts of information,
Mhm.
because then there's
Mhm.
a whole aspect of like we don't know how to get into this secret place, but we know of a uh, I don't know a nice word for it. I guess just whore. Like we know of a favored whore who does, and she's been
Mm.
dead for years, but we can
Yeah.
call on her and she can guide us where we need to be.
Oh,
Mm.
almost like an everything everywhere all at once type of situation where they, like,
Kinda.
can do something to
Oh
bring that
yeah.
spirit inside of them that takes over for a little bit until they get to, like, the next stage and so on.
Yeah, I love that idea that like the medium is like the type of person like a medium one who can channel ghosts
Mhm.
is the one who's like in power here because I think it makes
Mhm.
a lot of sense and I love the idea that they're tapping into this like fathomless well of pain and anguish, like that
Yeah.
absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh boy. All right. We're good there. I feel like we're
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
there. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't want to go any further unless we're going to devote an entire like series to that. But
Right.
bam, that's amazing. Absolutely
Yeah,
love
I
that.
love that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
Also, I feel like that Clark is like a Wusha Tower thing for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Uh
Oh,
like
yeah.
just tossing that in there for you because I know that anyway. All right. So we are in a good place. We've got one more jam session in us, I think, before we're completely tapped out. So let's go ahead and roll and see what we're working with this time. So the genre that we're working with this time is going to be we've got cyberpunk. So there we go. We're in a cyberpunk world. The theme is going to be curses, and the focus is An historic event.
Hmm.
So we've got cyberpunk with a theme of curses and an historic event. Clark, have we gotten cyberpunk together like multiple times now? I feel like we've gotten cyberpunk a couple of times together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to re-roll that, or are we cool rolling with it?
I'm cool rolling with it.
I'm fine either way.
Okay. Well, oh man, tell you what. Let's see what we would have gotten if I rolled something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's see.
Holy shit, I keep rolling 2. I keep rolling cyberpunk. Okay, that's a 9, which means gothic horror.
Hmm.
So we could do cyberpunk curses and historic event, or gothic horror curses and an historic event. What do y'all think?
I vote the cyberpunk because gothic horror curses and historic event is just a little too straightforward and easy.
A little too simple.
Yeah, okay. I'm down for cyberpunk too. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I made Courtney go first last time because rebellion. Clark, I mean, what curse do you have in mind in a cyberpunk world?
I'm not sure. Like, the first thing that comes to mind is different kinds of malware and viruses and stuff like that. I want to see if we can push a little further.
Agreed.
Like, there might be some metaphorical things where it is like some metaphorical or thematic themes of the curse of technology itself. But that's also kind of already baked into cyberpunk. So I'm not really sure.
Well, there's also like the curse of consciousness, of like self-awareness or existentialism, right? So it could be about the curse of knowledge as a recently awakened, or let's say that. It could be like a recently awakened like AI or something like that, where they're suddenly realizing that they're sentient. So that could be a way that we could aim with it too. I mean, I know that's also kind of in there in terms of cyberpunk tropes, but
what about bear with me on this. What about like a curse of irrelevance?
Go on.
So like, as the technology and stuff progresses, and maybe we can turn this into like an actual curse, an actual program or something like that. But thematically, with the advancement of technology, there's a lot of things that start to become irrelevant, and ways of being and skills and professions and stuff that quickly kind of get wiped out. So I'm wondering if we could play on themes of that, maybe make actual codes and stuff that will, like, I don't know, downgrade implants to like previous versions. So you get this software, this new implant that has all of these advanced patches and stuff like that, and you get hit with the curse, and you go back to early beta testing, which is missing all of the features you need to actually do what you need to do.
So this isn't necessarily irrelevant so much as it is obsolescence. This is like obsolescence here, right? Like, it's beyond planned. Yeah.
I do want to point out that I'm pretty sure we did do an obsolescence one in a previous jam, like a cyberpunk thing.
Oh, it was the organ, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Or like lifespan, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's stick with the original interpretation of Clark's irrelevance then, right? If we're in a cyberpunk world where, which we kind of already are, where, attention is currency, then irrelevance might be a curse, right? To be literally unperceivable is in some way kind of an interesting take on it, especially if it's like, hey, you're a person whose, like avatar suddenly flitters out and stops working, and the totally cyber world literally cannot see you anymore. That's kind of interesting too.
Yeah. Could we do something with like social scores and that idea?
Sure.
Yeah.
Like as you
you literally can't be perceived if your score gets low enough.
Like literally fade away if you're not like active enough or not socially liked enough or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, you get completely banned from different parts of the cybersphere.
Yeah.
And you're not relevant anymore, so you're not allowed into these places. Because maybe it's because of the gothic horror influence, but I'm thinking of the old school like gypsy curses, right? Of somebody has been pissed off and they level this curse against you, and it starts
Mm.
affecting your life and your family in all of these different ways. So yeah, just that's the weird place my brain is going. It's not anything concrete, but somebody levels a curse of irrelevance against you, and
Mm.
your opinions like stop having value. Like other things are built that replace you. This is a very weird place, but I'm trying not to go in any of our normal obvious directions here.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm also trying to not go in that Black Mirror episode that has the social
Also
score thing.
that, yeah, I had that in my mind as
Yeah,
well. Yeah.
but yeah, I like the idea of like it is a forced irrelevance. Like you are harder to see, you're harder to even hear. Like maybe
Mhm.
people in conversation start to talk over you more, and you're like, "What the hell's going on?" And then you notice that your social score is dipped down, so like they literally have a hard time hearing you, or like your
Yeah.
speech is delayed or something.
Or alternatively, right? Like that's all really good. I love that. I love the malicious aspect to it, where maybe it's a matter of like it is a virus that literally turns you down to other people, so you become less relevant. Alternatively, we could do something like whatever you try and post or say, like there is a malware thing that literally has you perceived differently by other people. Like it's like Clark could say something like, "Hey, I think that's a really, like great ramen spot." And what they hear in result is like, "Have you guys ever like picked the stuff between your toes and ate it? Like, I think that's pretty good." And it's just like they look at you like, "What the fuck?" Like
Yeah.
What if it actually strips your identity from the stuff that you do online? So you make that post about the ramen place, but then the second you leave, it's listed as anonymous.
Oh, so no
Wouldn't
matter
that
how
be kind of
hard.
a superpower though? Like, I feel like you'd be able to twist that.
Only if it did it in like positive stuff. So anything that was good and people liked, like the second people like it, your connection to it is removed. So you
Yeah.
don't get attributed anything that you contribute.
Sorry, Courtney, I cut you off. What did you say?
Yeah. No, I like that because it's like you think you make this like big effort post on some forum and it like lists all these things and you're trying to be helpful, and then like it ends up that maybe it even gets assigned to somebody else who has a much higher score than you or something.
Yeah.
And you log back in, it's like, what the fuck? Like I made that post, right? Like, am I going insane here? What's happening? And then like, how do you get yourself out of that? And also like you kind of implied, Rob, like it could be helpful for, trolls and stuff. And maybe that's even where it originated in like a 4chan style, like cyberpunk thing.
But I'm thinking like specifically helpful stuff you do is what gets stripped away, and then everything negative lingers with you. So then you're quickly, all people see is that weird stuff you posted.
Yeah. Oh, it's like the people who kind of go way back into celebrities' Twitter feeds and are like, well, 20 years ago, you like that sort of thing. You made this like rude remark and everybody dogpiles them. And
it strips away everything except your rude remarks,
right?
Your off-color comments, and
what I'm hearing is that this is so. Courtney, I think you're absolutely right in saying that this is like a troll's like design, right? Like a troll originally created something that allowed them to shitpost anonymously without consequence, right? Because suddenly it was a world where you couldn't be anonymous anymore. Except now it's inverted, where all of your hot takes and bad opinions are like magnified and broadcast, but all of your helpful and like normal stuff is like muted or attributed elsewhere. So for example, right, let's say you put out a big effort post and you're like, wow, this is going to be like revolutionary and blah, 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 blah. And then like someone takes it or it gets attributed elsewhere. And then so as a result, you follow up with a second video that's like, this is bullshit. My work's getting stolen, like blah, 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 blah. And that's what gets posted, but not the first one. Like the first one is still attributed. So you look like a crazy person.
Right.
So
that kind of like reverse troll type of cyberpunk world, that I think that's kind of an interesting thing that you could do there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the shit posting virus.
Yeah. Or it's like, I actually like it better if it was like someone who wanted the original, like, I want to be able to be anonymous and shit post.
Yeah.
But like they like pissed off the dealer, or like the dealer was just like, oh yeah, fuck you, man. And then like gave them the corrupted one anyway. Like, I think that's also really fun.
So
Mhm.
how could we tie this to a historic event? Because I like
You're
this. And
right.
I think
Oh
that
God, I forgot.
Good call.
I think that does tie into like the irrelevance, right? Because then anything good you're doing is being stripped away. So at best, you're irrelevant. At worst, you're a hated target.
Mhm.
Mhm.
How can we tie this to a historic event or create a historic
Mhm.
event around this?
I feel like it's the fact that it's changing history, basically. Like,
Mm.
the line about whoever wins is the one who writes history books. It's like history is
Mm,
actively changing as this thing perpetuates. So, like,
Ah.
one moment you could be like, oh, yeah, this actress did all this great work and I love her stuff. And then 10 days later, she's been stripped of everything because she's been hit
Yeah.
with this curse and like her
yeah.
work is no longer relevant. She's been
Yep.
blacklisted everywhere and so on. And like it actively changes what people even remember about like the near past.
Oh, yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, Courtney, in that it depends on who it's coming from, that's where the historic event comes from. Because,
Mm.
like, imagine this world, right? Like, you're a celebrity who's dogpiled and who's like every move is scrutinized, and all you want to do is to shit post a little bit and be anonymous for just a little bit. So you sign yourself up, but then, like the person who sells it to you is like, oh, I don't like this celebrity. Or it doesn't even necessarily have to be a celebrity. Maybe it's like the fucking president or something like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
like, or because we're in cyberpunk, like a high ranking, like Zaibatsu corporate member or something like
Yeah.
Mhm.
that. Yeah. So
Or
either one of those work for me.
or even
Mhm.
making it kind of like an actual curse, right? Where it's something that you don't necessarily control, but there are things you can do to try and direct it at people. So if a
Mm.
lot of people are sending this message or this code or these tags towards a specific person, it increases the chance of this program that is floating around in the cyberscape will latch onto them.
Mhm.
So you're trying to mark people for this weird ghost in the machine to come and strip away their relevance. And
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of blending in the gothic horror elements into the cyberpunk here.
Mm.
But to add some of that bit of calling beyond of what you actually have control to try and get some kind of either petty vengeance or true vengeance on these different people.
Ooh. All right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, because we're thinking curses, I'm going back to like some slasher movie type stuff where it's an I
Mhm.
know what you did last summer type of event where it's like there's a group of friends who are being affected by irrelevance.
Hell
And it's
yeah.
because maybe they, like dogpiled on a particular
Yeah.
person or like publicly shamed someone and like maybe that person like committed suicide or something like that. And as a result, the curse of them is irrelevance. And we get to see what that looks like in a cyberpunk world, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was thinking that too, like a group of teenagers using the cyberpunk equivalent of like TikTok, and there's like this trend that they find to tag people in certain ways, and they're messing around with it and doing like dumb stuff online. And maybe years later, they realize that their use of that tag has kind of made them a target for the virus itself.
yeah.
Mm.
And like that's when it comes back to bite them in the ass.
Or even a group of influencers that inadvertently
Yeah.
ruined
Oh,
one or multiple
yeah.
people because the
Yeah.
information they had was bad. Because that happens all the time, right? People
Yeah.
have partial information or it's presented to them in a certain way and then they post on it, and because they're an influencer that then becomes reality. So if
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah.
group of people that did something like that, doesn't have to be malicious, because in a lot of the slasher movies sometimes it's like, oh, we accidentally killed somebody while we were driving and we decided to keep it secret. That then turning into them slowly having their entire reality and existence dismantled.
Mhm.
Mm. Well, shit. That's a good way to go out, I think. Because that's all really cool. Is there anything that we need to like put a bow on, or like, because I feel like that's a good place to stop, because then you just kind of like create or you expand from there that scenario.
The only
Yeah.
other thing I can think of is if we wanted to make that like horror event, that collapse of this group become a historic event.
That's what I
Mhm.
mean. Like, imagine that, like, okay, this is gonna sound real boomery on my part, but like in today's like social media landscape, it's like what happens if Mr. Beast just suddenly goes away?
Yeah.
Like it's not like actually historic, but it would be internet historic, right?
Mhm.
And we've seen that with like bigger YouTubers this year, like some people like stepping away from YouTube and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
it's like attention and waves and stuff like that. And I feel like we can also play, because theme of curse is malleable. I feel like historic event, it can be historic to the internet, and I think that's
Yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dig it.
Another question would be like, if this would be an RPG, would the players be playing this group of influencers who's been like dragged through the mud, or would it be a group of random people online who are trying to figure this out? Yeah.
I feel like you wouldn't want to be, because, well, okay, if you are the influencers, then I would run it like it's I Know What You Did Last Summer, where it's kind of a slasher, right? Except you don't die, you just become so irrelevant that you can't
Yeah.
be perceived anymore.
Yeah.
But I actually think this would probably be a more interesting thing if you were like, like you were approached by a client, and the client, it gives you this kind of like, you're like, I don't know why I'm becoming irrelevant. And then you have to piece all of this together and figure out that they were actually kind of a dickhead at some point,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that could work, especially if your own perception of them as a client shifts over time as they
Oh,
become more
yeah.
irrelevant. And you
Yeah.
like wake up one morning and it's like, who was I doing all this research for? Shit.
Yeah. Or it's like they become like ghostly in a way, right? Like
Mhm.
they're difficult to perceive. And so they just become Victorian ghosts. Yeah, there we go. Absolutely.
Unless you meet them in reality, which in cyberpunk, like you were probably dealing with somebody who was cities or half a continent over,
Yeah.
and you were doing all of this investigating online, and all of a sudden you have no way to get in touch with them unless you find where they really live and go and talk to them in person, which is kind of at that point the cyberpunk equivalent of speaking with the dead, right?
Yeah, especially if it's like the client seeks you out because you stopped being able to perceive them entirely.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
suddenly,
yeah.
suddenly you have this random person showing up at your doorstep, and it's like, wait, who are you? Are you sure I was working for you? Like, who are you again?
Actually, that's how the adventure hook starts, is you are like doing your own life, and all of a sudden someone shows up at your door being like, no, this is what happened, like, and then,
Yeah,
shit,
yeah,
Or even if it didn't make you forget, it's kind of the reverse of seeing a ghost.
yeah,
Because this
Mm.
person disappeared online and then they suddenly show up in reality,
yeah,
which is like, that's the opposite of like this person was in your reality and then they show up in a spectral and tangible form. You only knew them in this spectral and tangible form, and now
Oh,
they
yeah.
show up in your real life, and it's sort of the reverse of seeing a ghost.
Gross.
yeah.
I gotta see people in the meat space.
No,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, like I've definitely met plenty of people who I knew online first, like Clark, for example. And there is that always that weird, like, oh wow, you are like you're taller than I expected, that sort of thing. And imagine that times like 20, because in the cyberpunk world, I'm imagining that so much communication is done purely online, purely remotely.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And avatars could be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they show up and it's like, oh fuck, that's you?
Yeah. 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 I too have hugged Clark in the meat space. So yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I didn't think Clark was going to be shorter than he was. So maybe
Yeah. I think he's short.
in your head, Clark was a short king. I don't know. That's on you, Courtney.
I don't think I pictured him short, which is not as tall. I don't know.
For the record, Clark is 5'3". So okay. I feel like we're gonna go out on that because that's a really cool way that we can kind of end and fade away into obscurity. Hell, we're already halfway there. So
And to clarify, Clark is definitely not 5'3".
yes, thank you for correcting my slander. Yeah. So speaking of Clark, where can people find you so you don't slip into irrelevance?
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube as The Magic Engineer. You can also follow me on my website, which is crrowenson.com. I'm more active on YouTube, but you can contact me through my website. If you have extra money or want to support or don't know what to do with your money, you can also support me on Patreon. I don't have as many awesome rewards as these guys do, but there is a lot of stuff I have related to the coaching services I provide and discounts and things you can get. So yeah, Patreon. There's also links on my YouTube videos. So there you go.
fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us once again, Clark.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
don't count as a special guest anymore, but I'm still going to say thanks for showing up anyway. But that is going to do it for this episode of World Build with us. Much like Clark, we also have a Patreon where if you want to give us money, you can do so if you're feeling particularly generous. We also have a Discord if you want to come chat with us more directly. We're also on social media on YouTube and Twitter. And of course, if you want us to build your world, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow some instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. That's going to do it for this episode. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.